Good morning, good evening, gentlemen. I'm going to talk to you about what's happening in Europe. The battle in Ukraine is continuing. Winter has set in, and I think the other day I read a news item that in case Ukraine has to be rebuilt, it will need at least $1 trillion of infusion to come back to the old level. It's a very dangerous thing. And all this is because of the war in Ukraine, which, as I've already pointed out in my previous videos, is been instigated by Mr. Zelensky on the prodding of the Americans. Now, there's no point in going into the old history, how this happened. I've already said in my earlier videos. But now the situation is the war has continued for almost 8 months, and there doesn't seem to be any end in sight. And earlier, the Americans and the EU were very confident that the Russians would collapse economically with all the sanctions and having been taken out of SWIFT and the embargoes put on them. But they failed to realize the Russian economy is extremely resilient and they have been able to turn the tables on the Americans. Even NATO is running short of weapons, and they have told the Ukrainians to use their weapons judiciously. And the fact remains that about 20% of the territory of Ukraine still is in Russian hands, and Ukraine hasn't even been able to take that back. So the question is, happens what next? The loser in this entire game is Ukraine. And I fail to understand how the Ukrainian people continue with a man like Zelensky, who has really ruined the Ukrainian economy. Ukraine, which was the granary of Europe, had a higher per capita income than Russia, is now wobbling like a dead tiger on the lying in the jungle. The industry is destroyed. They are suffering casualties every day, and now Putin is fighting a no holds barred battle. He knows he cannot afford to lose. If he loses, Russia finishes the global power. That's the end of Russia. He'll never cease. He cannot allow that to happen. In that case, he has started now the long range missiles which are hitting Ukraine. Ukraine is having a power shortage, industry is not functioning, millions of Ukrainians have run away to other countries of Europe as refugees, and there is an element of fear in the countries bordering Russia like Poland, Finland. They're pretty scared. And Poland in particular has a lot to fear the Russians because the Russians had divided the country along with the Germans in 1939 and Poland had ceased to exist on the world map. But at the same time, the Poles are relying on American power, like Ukraine was relying. I remember uh, when the war started, the Ukrainian President Zelensky had addressed the Senate and for making daily pleas, please enforce a no-fly zone over Ukraine. He didn't realize that the Americans are going to enforce it. They can't enforce it. This is not Kosovo. This is not Iraq. Russia is a regional power of great significance, and to enforce a no-fly zone means triggering Third World War and the destruction of the Western civilization. Now, America is not going to allow the destruction of their cities like Chicago, New York, San Francisco just for the sake of Ukraine. So they didn't enforce the no-fly zone. They've been giving them weapons, but at the same time, there's a restriction that you will not use them on the Russian hinterland. And this is what is pricking Zelensky. Zelensky is now caught in the jaw's mouth of a shark, He doesn't know how to get out of it. But in my opinion, the time is not far when Zelensky has to throw in the towel. There'll be no choice. And if he doesn't throw, it's going to be something very disastrous for him. I have no hesitation in saying that Vladimir Putin is a man cast in the mold more of Bismarck, the German chancellor, than Stalin. And whereas Stalin was very cautious, this man is not. And I wouldn't be surprised if he uses the nuclear option. It should be no surprise to anybody. Tactical nuclear weapons have been invented. They are not mass destruction weapons, but they carry out a limited destruction which can be very harmful. And there are devious methods, ways and means of which you can fight this battle. You don't have to use a bomber to throw a nuclear missile or something. No, it will be something which will implode from inside Ukraine. There are secret agents, fifth columnists available who will go and blow up one nuclear plant, and you can imagine the radiation that will spread. Ukraine has experience of a meltdown of a Ukraine plant many years back when at Chernobyl. You all know the meltdown took place, and the effects are still there now. I don't understand how Zelensky has really miscalculated badly. I think he was misled by Biden. Of course, the other powers really didn't matter, and he ignored them. He ignored the French and the Germans, and he ignored everything. He put all his eggs in the basket of Biden, thinking Biden is going to help me. I'm going to be the leader. And that resulted, instead of the leader, he's become the running dog. He's running here and there. He doesn't know what to do, and he keeps on making speeches. He recently made a speech criticizing India. You can do anything. But the net result remains Ukraine is devastated. And who's got responsible for it? Somebody has to advise me. Is anybody going to advise me? I think it is you, Zelensky. You can't put the blame on Biden. Biden is fighting for American interests. He's not looking after Ukraine. How is he bothered about Ukraine? All he's interested in the hegemony of the Americans, the United States of Europe, and he's achieving it. Poland is pretty frightened. They said we want nuclear weapons. Again, the Polish don't realize that nuclear weapons are not a death rate. It's got nothing to do. America will not give a single nuclear weapon to Poland. Mark my words. Now the question is, what next? I think the only course of action is that Zelensky throws in the towel and agrees to the Russian terms of conditions. I think there is pressure on him from the Americans to negotiate with the Russians without condition. And he's refusing to do it, but ultimately he'll have to do it. Otherwise, he's going to risk the destruction of Ukraine. I feel very sad when I have to talk to you like this, but Ukraine is heading for only one way. You know, there was a famous song of Bonnie M, One Way Ticket to the Moon. Well, Zelensky got a one way ticket to destruction. That is the present point we are going to make. Gentlemen, I hope you like my assessment of the situation. The war in Ukraine is continuing. Russians are using missiles. They haven't been defeated. They haven't won the war, yes, but they're holding 20% of the territory. Ukraine is at its end of the tether. The Americans are also worried. They don't want the conflict to expand. They don't want a nuclear war. But if Zelensky continues, all this will happen. And the Americans know it. And let us see if they can put pressure on Mr. Zelensky. I think the only course that of action at the moment appears to be that Mr. Zelensky either abdicates, goes away, or maybe he might be arrested. Either way, he has to change his colors, negotiate for peace. Otherwise, he should be ready for the destruction of Ukraine. Well, gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed this short video, and I will say, Jai Hind, God bless. And just in passing, I'll say again, please subscribe to my video, share it with your friends. Goodbye. God bless.